welcome back to Friday Reads, where we help you find your next read. I'm Jill.
And I'm Julie, and we're sitting among the stacks today. We are in the true crime section, our special collection, because we are featuring books that feature true crime. So Jill, what's your first pick?
My first pick is a classic in this genre. Anne Rule, The Stranger Beside Me, Ted Bundy, The Shocking Inside Story. This was first published in 1980. It has been re-released in some places, so utterly unique in its astonishing intimacy, as jarringly frightening as when it first appeared, Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me defies our expectation that we would surely know if a monster lived among us, worked alongside us, appeared as one of us, with a slow chill that intensifies with each heart-pounding page. Rule describes her dawning awareness that Ted Bundy, her sensitive co-worker on a crisis hotline, was one of the most prolific serial killers in America. He would confess to killing at least 36 young women from coast to coast and was eventually executed for 3 of those cases. Drawing from their correspondence that endured until shortly before Bundy's death and striking seamless balance between her deeply personal perspective and her role as a crime reporter on the hunt for a savage serial killer. The brilliant and charismatic Bundy, the man she thought she knew, Rule changed the course of true crime literature with this unforgettable chronicle. And Anne Rule went on, she wrote a whole bunch of other true crime things too, but this was her original one and based on her own experience, so kind of cool.
Goodness. All right, my first pick is The Babysitter by Liza Rodman. This was published back in 2021. Growing up on Cape Cod in the 1960s, Liza Rodman was a lonely little girl. During the summers, while her mother worked days in a local motel and danced most nights in the Provincetown bars, her babysitter, the kind, handsome handyman at the motel where her mother worked, took her and her sister on adventures in his truck. But there was one thing she didn't know. Their babysitter was a serial killer. Some of his victims were buried in pieces right there in his garden in the woods. Though Tony Costa's gruesome case made screaming headlines in 1969 and beyond, she never made the connection between her friendly babysitter and the infamous killer of numerous women, including 4 in Massachusetts, until several decades later. Haunted by nightmares and horrified by what she learned, Liza became obsessed with the case. Now she and co-writer Jennifer Jordan reveal the chilling and unforgettable true story of a charming but brutal psychopath through the eyes of a young girl who once called him her friend and babysitter.
Wow.
Yeah, that one gave me chills.
You think this person's going to take care of your kids. And so I have another classic for you if you're interested in true crime. Helter Skelter, The True Story of Manson Murders by Vincent Bugliosi. This was published in 1974 and is still often referred to as, the representative for this. Prosecuting attorney in the Manson trial, Vincent Bugliosi held a unique insider's position in one of the most baffling and horrifying cases of the 20th century. The cold-blooded Tate LaBianca murders carried out by Charles Manson and 4 of his followers. What motivated Manson in his seemingly mindless selection of victims, and what was his hold over the young woman who obeyed his orders? Here's the gripping story of the famous and haunting crime. So, another classic.
My second pick goes back a ways. This is Little Shoes, The Sensational Depression-Era Murders That Became My Family's Secret by Pamela Everett. This was published back in 2018. In the summer of 1937, with the Depression deep and World War II looming, a California crime stunned an already grim nation. 3 little girls were lured away from a neighborhood park to unthinkable deaths. After a frantic week-long manhunt for the killer, a suspect emerged, and his sensational trial captivated audiences from coast to coast. Justice was swift, and the condemned man was buried away with the horrifying story. But decades later, our author, a lawyer and former journalist, starts digging, following a cryptic comment her father once made about losing 2 of his sisters. Her journey is uniquely personal as she uncovers her family's secret history, but the investigation quickly takes unexpected turns into her professional wheelhouse. Everett unearths a truly historic legal case that included one of the earliest criminal profiles in the United States, the genesis of modern sex offender laws, and the last man sentenced to hang in California. It's a journey chronicled through the mind of a lawyer and from the heart of a daughter. This book is both a captivating true crime story and a profoundly personal account of one family's struggle to cope with tragedy through the generations. So, Little Shoes, The Sensational Depression-Era Murders That Became My Family's Secret.
Okay, my next book is American Predator, The Hunt for the Most Meticulous Serial Killer of the 21st Century by Maureen Callahan. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, the names of notorious serial killers are usually well known. They echo in the news and in public consciousness. But most people have never heard of Israel Keyes, one of the most ambitious and terrifying serial killers in modern history. The FBI considered his behavior unprecedented, described by a prosecutor as a force of pure evil. Keyes was a predator who struck all over the United States. He buried kill bits, cash, weapons, and body disposal tools in remote locations across the country. Over the course of his 14 years, Keyes would fly to a city, rent a car, and drive thousands of miles in order to use his kits. He would break into strangers' house, abduct the victims in broad daylight, and kill and dispose of them in mere hours. And then he would return home to Alaska, resuming a quiet, reliable construction worker devoted to his only daughter. When journalist Maureen Callahan first heard about Israel Keyes in 2012, she was captivated by how a killer of this magnitude could go undetected by law enforcement for over a decade. And so began a project that consumed her for the next several years, uncovering the true story about how the FBI ultimately caught Israel Keyes and trying to understand what it means for a killer like Keyes to exist, a killer who left a path of monstrous, randomly committed crimes in his wake, many of which remain unsolved to this day. So,
My next book is actually a story of hope. This is Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings by Michelle Knight. This was published in 2018, which was the 5-year anniversary of her escape. Michelle Knight, now known as Lily Rose Lee, captured the world's attention in May 2013 when she and 2 fellow kidnapping victims were found and freed after being held for more than a decade by notorious Cleveland kidnapper Ariel Castro. But many people are still asking, what happened after her escape? How do you re-enter society after years of abuse and isolation? How do you get past the trauma and live a happy and joy-filled life? And how do you learn to trust again? In this book, Lily describes how she managed to heal the wounds to her body, mind, and soul, wounds she reveals that were first inflicted even before her kidnapping. With the help of good friends and anchored by her own inner strength, she takes us with her step by step on her journey out of darkness and into light. She changes her name. She finds her life's work in raising her voice on behalf of women and children everywhere. She finds her true home, and she finds love. It's an inspiring story, and for anyone who has dared to hope after suffering, it's a guidebook to finding new purpose for a meaningful life. So I thought I had to throw one in that was a hopeful story in this category.
I'm glad she didn't die. Okay, so the next one is The Good Girls, An Ordinary Killing by Sonia Falero. By award-winning writer of A Beautiful Thing, a masterly inquest into how a mysterious death of 2 teenage girls shone a light in the darkest corners of a nation. The girls' names were Padma and Lally, and they were so inseparable that people in the village called them Padma Lally. 16-year-old Padma sparked and burned. 14-year-old Lally was an incorrigible romantic. They grew up in Katra Sadaganj, an eye blink of a village in western Uttar Pradesh, crammed in less than 1 square mile of land. It was out in the fields in the middle of a mango season that the rumors started. Then one night, in the summer of 2014, the girls went missing, and hours later they were found hanging in the orchard. Who they were and what happened to them was already less important than what their disappearance meant to the people left behind. In the ensuing months, the investigation into their deaths would implode everything that their small community held to be true and investigate a national conversation about sex and violence, slipping deftly behind the political maneuvering, caste systems, and codes of honor in a village in northern India. The Good Girls returns to the scene of Padma and Lally's short lives and shameful deaths and dares to ask, what is the human cost of shame? So this was published in 2021, so it's kind of new.
My 4th pick is a book that I loved, Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This was published back in 2003. Author Eric Larson imbues the incredible events surrounding the 1893 Chicago World's Fair with such drama that readers may find themselves checking the book's categorization to be sure that this book is not, in fact, a highly imaginative novel. Larson tells the stories of 2 men, Daniel H. Burnham, the architect responsible for the fair's construction, and H. Holmes, a serial killer masquerading as a charming doctor. Burnham's challenge was immense. In a short period of time, he was forced to overcome the death of his partner and numerous other obstacles to construct the famous White City around which the World Fair was built. His efforts to complete the project and the fair's incredible success are skillfully related, along with entertaining appearances by such notables as Buffalo Bill Cody, Susan B. Anthony, and Thomas Edison. The activities of the sinister Dr. Holmes, who is believed to be responsible for scores of murders around the time of the fair, are equally remarkable in this book. He devised and erected the World's Fair Hotel, complete with a crematorium, a gas chamber, and it was near the fairgrounds, and used the event as well as his own charismatic personality to lure his victims. Combining the stories of an architect and a killer in one book, mostly in alternating chapters, seemed like an odd choice, but it worked. Like I said, I love this book. The magical appeal and horrifying dark side of 19th century Chicago are both revealed through Larson's skillful writing. So check out The Devil in the White City.
I read that one too, and it does read like a novel.
Yeah,
it's really good. And I love World Fair stuff. It's kind of different.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next one is I Heard You Paint Houses. Frank the Irishman Sheeran and the Closing Case on Jimmy Hoffa.
Oh boy.
This is by Charles Brandt. The first word Jimmy Hoffa ever spoke to Frank the Irishman Sheeran were, I heard you paint houses. To paint a house is to kill a man. The paint is the blood that spatters on the walls and floors. In the course of nearly 5 years of recorded interviews, Frank Sheeran confessed to Charles Brandt that he handled more than 25 hits for the mob and for his friend Jimmy Hoffa. Sheeran learned to kill in the U.S. Army, where he saw an astonishing 411 days of active combat duty in Italy during World War II. After returning home, he became a hustler and a hitman, working for legendary crime boss Russell Buffalino. Eventually, he would rise to the position of such prominence that in a RICO suit, and then U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani would name him as one of the only 2 non-Italians on a list of 26 top mob figures. When Buffalino ordered Sheeran to kill Hoffa, he did the deed, knowing that if he had refused, he would have been killed himself. Sheeran's important and fascinating story includes new information on other famous murders and provides rare insight into a chapter in the American history. Charles Brandt was written a page-turner that is determined to become a true crime classic. Well, we'll see about that. For Japan houses.
All right. And my last pick is kind of for fans of The Devil in the White City. Actually, this is Elliot Ness and the Mad Butcher, hunting America's deadliest unidentified serial killer at the dawn of modern criminology by Max Allan Collins. This was published back in 2020. And this is 1935, the nation's most legendary crime fighter, the man who had just taken down the greatest gangster in American history, arrives in Cleveland on the eve of hosting the World's Fair. It was to be his coronation as well as the city's. Instead, terror descended as headless bodies started washing up on the shores of Lake Erie. Elliot Ness's greatest case had begun. During Prohibition, Ness had risen to fame for his leading the Untouchables unit, which had helped put Al Capone behind bars. Soon after, he was hired as Cleveland's public safety director, in charge of the police and fire departments. Cleveland, then a rising industrial hub nearing the height of its powers, was preparing for a star turn itself, with the 1936 Great Lakes Exhibition, a World's Fair which would be visited by 7 million people. Late in the summer of 1935, however, those pieces of women's bodies began to show up on the Lake Erie shore. First there were ribs, then part of a backbone, and then on September 5th, the lower half of a torso. The body count soon grew to 5, then 10, then more, all dismembered in gruesome waves. As Elliot Ness zeroed in on a suspect, a doctor tied to a prominent political family, powerful forces thwarted his quest for justice. So in this battle between a flawed hero and a twisted monster, it's by turns horror story, political drama, and detective thriller, Collins and Schwartz find an American tragedy, classic in structure, epic in scope. So it does sound a bit like The Devil in the White City.
Yeah,
so if
World's
you're fans
Fair, too.
of that, said if you like The Devil in the White City, Furious Hours, or I'll Be Gone in the Dark, this true detective tale is going to be a favorite.
So we hope we helped you find something to read. If true crime is your jam.
Yeah, it's not mine, but our true crime books do move, and I know there's a lot of true crime podcasts that are popular, and you like the Dahmer series
I love the
that was
Dahmer
on,
things.
so there's definitely people that are into the true crime genre. So like, comment, share. You can find us on Kimberly Public Library's Facebook page, the YouTube channel. We thank you for that. We've been getting more views on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, we're growing.
Until next time, we thank you for watching.
Bye.
Bye.